Good Tuesday morning of the 18th week. I'll tell you, it's a great text today in Matthew. Now, you got to have to be somebody who likes boats and who likes big water to really understand this thing. It's my experience at Long Island Sound, the Atlantic Ocean, and even some good-sized lakes where it gives me the punch in this thing here. I'll show it to you. Jesus made the disciples get into a boat and precede him to the other side of the sea, while he dismissed the crowds. After doing so, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. That's he's there. When he goes up the mountain, he is always the new Moses, okay? Whenever you see those expressions, he's the new Moses. Matthew is writing to Jewish Christians. They wouldn't have missed that for one split second, okay? They said he's the new Moses, you see? Okay? And when it was evening, he was there alone. Meanwhile, this is the part that I understand. Meanwhile, the boat, already a few miles offshore, was being tossed about by the waves, for the wind was against it. During the fourth watch of the night, he came toward them walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and they cried out in fear. And once Jesus spoke to them, "Take courage, say, do not be afraid." Peter said to him, this is a great line, I love what St. Peter's so great. "Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come on." Peter got out of the boat and began to walk on the water toward Jesus. But when he saw how strong the wind was, he became frightened. He began to sink. He cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately, Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him. He said, "Oh, you little faith, why'd you doubt?" After they got into the boat, the wind died down. Those who were in the boat did him homage, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." After making the crossing, they came to a land at Gennesaret. When the men of that place recognized him, they sent word all around the country. People brought to him all those who were sick, and he begged him that they might touch only the tassel on his cloak, and as many touched it were healed. See? I love the story of the boat and walking on the water. You know, that's a symbol. By the time Matthew is writing this thing, the church is getting creamed. Okay, they're getting a beating. Okay, what's it, 65 A.D.? We're Jerusalem, a large Jewish community. Here they were a break-off group. They're getting their brains knocked out. And the symbol of violence and war is the ocean, is the tumult, the storm of the sea. It's bigger than you are. And the boat, which is always the church, the bark of Peter, you see, is bouncing around out there. And Christ transcends the storm. And he invites Peter to trust him. Come up, you will transcend the storm. Peter, being who he is, starts to doubt. And as soon he gets scared. And as soon as he starts to doubt, he sinks into the confusion and the violence. He cries out, though, "Save me." And it's Christ who pulls him out of the water. He pulls him, you see, and restores him to the boat. You see? It's a great symbol. To the early church, it must have been consoling. Beg Christ, he transcends the chaos. He transcends the violence. Trust him. Even if you get your doubts and you start sinking, cry out and he'll pull you out of the water. Isn't that neat? He'll pull you out of the water. That's the truth. You know, you have to understand, well, you don't have to do anything, but for me, having been in boats all my life since I was a little kid, you learn how small, you know, there's a sign. I got it, actually. I keep it in my boat, but I also have it on the wall going down my steps there. And it says, "Oh God, how big is your ocean and how small is my boat?" How big is your ocean? How small is my boat? Boy, if that isn't true. Anyone who's been in big water, whether it's a big lake, but I always think the ocean is even more symbolically wild, okay, and beyond you. I lived on Lake Erie, and believe me, that's one hell of a hunk of water, okay? Holy cow, you can't see the other side, okay? But somehow it doesn't have the mythic power that Long Island Sound has in the Atlantic Ocean, any ocean. You have no doubt in the ocean that your boat is small and the ocean is big. And you learn something else. My father taught us this. Time and tide waits for no man. You pay attention to the tide, and you pay attention to the wind. You never, ever, ever not pay attention to the wind, because the wind affects not the tide, of course, but it affects especially it affects how can I say, the kind of water, whether it be rough or calm, is often affected by the wind. And the wind brings with it, depending on its direction, of course, it's with it, is the storms, the potential for storms. Okay? I said that all wrong. And if anybody knows anything about meteorology, this guy's nuts. Get the point. Pay attention to the sky. Pay attention to the water. Anybody who's been in a boat on a large body of water, especially the ocean, knows watch the sky, watch the water, and not brave yourself against it. Know your limitations. Boy, you know when to come in. Believe me. And there's nothing as really scary as to be caught out in it and not be able to get in. I told you this story so many times, but it was a powerful experience for me. The tide was going out, and the wind was called a shore breeze. It was blowing out into the ocean, into the sound. And we didn't have an outboard, so it was 1952 or 3, a long time ago, 70 years ago. My dad couldn't row against it. It was just Pop and I. We tied ourselves up to a lobster pot. I told this story too many times. We were only about 2 or 3 miles out. Whatever. But it was scary. It was scary, not in a silly sense, but it was because you knew how big the ocean was, how big the water was. You have no way you can combat it. There's no way. You're at its mercy. We tied up to a lobster pot. And I told the story what my father did. We didn't have life jackets. We had safety cushions, life cushions. And he tied his to me. I had 2, one in front, one in back. My father gave me his life preserver. The boat had capsized. My father would have drowned. He gave me his life at that moment. You know, you never doubt what love is after somebody hands you their life preserver in an ocean that's erupting. I know, I identify with these guys in the water, in the boat. It's rock and roll. You know that you are a creature. You know you're not in control. You trust the boat. There's a great line. Anybody who ever ran boats, they say, never leave the boat. It's a good thing about the church. Never leave the boat. You think you could swim in that ocean? Go get them, Tiger. They'll fish you out someday if the sharks don't eat you. Stay with the boat. The boat will not sink. Stay with the boat. It's a great image. I know. My father actually gave me bad advice that day. He said, swim to Scotch Cap. It was an island about a mile away. What he should have said is, no matter what happens, stay with the boat. You see, stay with the boat. Yeah. What a model of the church. Stay with the church. No matter how rough it is, the boat will not sink. The church will not sink. She doesn't have to be pretty. She doesn't have to be powerful. She's not a big 18 or 20 footer. She's just a lousy rowboat. Guess what? She'll float. You won't. That's the truth. I appreciate what these stories. I appreciate this gospel because I know what it's like to be in a boat. When everything gets bigger than you are, and there is that sense of helplessness that Peter felt as he sank in the water. Lord, save me. He doubted, and in he goes. So in a way, he left the boat. He should have stayed in the boat. Instead, he tried to walk beyond the boat, and he went. No, and he went. Stay in the boat. See? And if you should, by happenstance, fall out of the boat, call Christ. He'll pull you back in. Don't leave the church. Don't leave the church. She is the bark of Peter. She will always float. She may not be pretty. Some of the rowboats I was in were downright ugly. They weren't fancy, but they floated. And they were the means of salvation in a water that takes no prisoners. It's a water that has a life of its own. A water driven by the winds and the tides.